East.
I'll be splitting my time with the member for Outremont. Mr. Speaker, on Friday, January 27, 2017, President Donald Trump signed an executive order banning nationals of 7 Muslim-majority countries from the United States for at least the next 90 days. The countries included in this ban are Iraq, Syria, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. Also included in the executive order are an indefinite ban on Syrian refugees and a 4-month ban on the admission of any refugee or refugee claimant. These edicts have sent disbelief and shockwaves throughout the international community. I, for one, can say this: in all of my life, I never thought that I would witness a ban based on race, religion, and place of birth from any democratic country, much less from Canada's closest ally and neighbor. Since the immigration and travel ban has been made public, I've received hundreds of emails and phone calls from constituents who absolutely reject these racist policies, policies that so clearly violate many international refugee and human rights legal obligations, including the 1951 Refugee Convention and its 1967 Protocol, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the Convention Against Torture. It is therefore our duty as their elected representatives to respond to these extraordinary events. Mr. Speaker, how ironic it is that the Trump executive orders were made on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Shame. Honestly, Mr. Speaker, have we learned nothing from history? A ban against individuals based on race, on religion, or country of birth simply cannot be tolerated. I rose in this House yesterday to propose this emergency debate, and I would like to acknowledge and thank the Speaker for granting my request. It is my utmost sincere hope that we will have a productive and nonpartisan discussion about what action Canada needs to take in light of the Trump administration's immigration and travel ban. Canadians cherish their role as global citizens and are staunch defenders of human rights both at home and abroad. Over the weekend, the Prime Minister tweeted, and I quote, "To those fleeing persecution, terror, and war, Canadians will welcome you, regardless of your faith. Diversity is our strength," end quote. When Canadians heard these words, we cannot help but to feel a sense of pride, for it reaffirms our Canadian values. And now, Mr. Speaker, it is time for us to give meaning to these words with an action plan. Mr. Speaker, exceptional situations require exceptional actions. This is one of those moments. Canadians are loud and clear that they want us to step in. The unprecedented outpouring of support, fundraising, and activism on the part of Canada's refugee sponsorship community has not faded. As a first measure, yesterday, I called on the government to immediately remove the 1,000 application cap on privately sponsored refugees as a first step. Hear, hear. Canadians have overwhelmingly shown their generosity and compassion by stepping up to provide private sponsorship in the Syrian Refugee Initiative. Instead of stifling this incredible spirit of compassion and kindness, Canada should be facilitating this gesture of hope by lifting the cap on privately sponsored refugees. Second, in addition to this measure, I'm also calling on the government to show leadership with a special measure to fast-track the refugee applications that have already been successfully screened and processed for resettlement in the U.S., or those that are near completion but are now caught in this ban. These individuals are now left in a devastating limbo, and that is simply unacceptable. We all know that women, children, families who face violence and persecution caught in this ban will be left out in the cold, and Syrian refugees will be refused indefinitely. How could that be, Mr. Speaker? To date, the government's response has been simply to say, stay the course. We must remember that the current course of action proposed by the government was what was in place before the Trump ban on immigration and travel. If we do not modify our current immigration plan and policies, then we are just bystanders in the face of these intolerable discriminatory policies. And sadly, the Prime Minister's words will then ring hollow, rendered as meaningless rhetoric in this important moment in our history. None of us want to see that. Third, given the severe and serious implication of the ban, Canada must now determine whether or not the American refugee system can be deemed to be providing a safe haven for those who face persecution. A number of organizations, including Amnesty International, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, the Canadian Association of Refugee Lawyers, and the Canadian Council for Refugees, amongst many others, have called on the government to suspend the Canada-U.S. Safe Third Country Agreement. The principle behind the Safe Third Country Agreement is that Canada should be able to rely on another country, a safe country, that a refugee claimant has made or traveled through to provide a fair hearing, and effective protection should it be warranted, rather than allowing the individuals to continue to Canada to make a claim. At the heart of this, Canada must be confident that other countries' record for refugee rights and human rights is both adequate and equivalent to that of Canada's. Mr. Speaker, given these troubling developments, it's simply not possible to suggest that the U.S. currently reaches these standards. Canada can no longer have confidence that the American refugee system is providing a safe haven for those who face persecution. The New Democrats are therefore calling on the government to immediately suspend the Safe Third Country Agreement. Finally, the Canadian government must take immediate steps to ensure that Canadians are not impacted by this executive order, and to reassure Canadian dual nationals and Canadian permanent residents that they can travel safely. Since the signing of the executive order, there has been a troubling amount of confusion and concern as to who is impacted by this ban. The confusion and concern has been expressed not just by Canadian dual nationals, but also by the Canadian Border Service Agency, as little information has been told to them how they would enforce this issue. During the government's press conference over the weekend, representatives of the CBSA made it clear that they were not being given adequate information as to how to handle this executive order. They stated, and I quote, "We will be watching what the executive order means in terms of details. Until we have the level of understanding, we don't know. We are confident in our current screening system processes." Despite verbal assurances that the ban did not apply to Canadian dual nationals and those with permanent resident status in Canada traveling with passports from one of the 7 countries impacted by the ban, there are immediate reports at least one individual is being denied entry into the United States. Dr. Rita, an Alberta biomedical engineer born in Iran and a Canadian permanent resident, was denied entry into the United States on Saturday while traveling with a group of colleagues to a San Francisco biomedical engineering conference. It was reported that he was told that because he was born in Iran, he couldn't pass through the airport. Many members are concerned. There are many issues with respect to this. As the NDP critic for immigration, refugee, and citizenship, I am calling on the government to act. We need to give meaning to the Prime Minister's words and to take action. Canada can and Canada must do this. George Washington once said, quote, "Happily, the government of the United States gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance," end quote. If the Trump administration won't live up to the wise words of his predecessor, then Canada and the international community must step up and stand united with a clear voice and offer a clear path forward. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to speak.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think it would be appropriate to start off by repeating what it is that the member made reference to. I believe that the government, through the Prime Minister of Canada, has been very, very clear on the issue. And I will repeat the tweet that was put, the words that were put on the record shortly after. And I quote, to those feeling persecution, terror and war, Canadians will welcome you regardless of your faith. Diversity is our strength. Mr. Speaker, this is a message. Diversity is our strength that the Prime Minister has said for ever since I have known him, Mr. Speaker. He is a man of great tolerance and understanding of what real Canadian values are. And when called upon, he is a Prime Minister that has come to the plate and been there for Canadians, and I believe that Canadians understand that. We see through this ministry that the Prime Minister has put together a group of individuals from the Minister of Foreign Affairs to our Minister of Immigration take actions that I believe are in the best interests of Canada as a whole, maintaining the values that Canadians have. My question to the member is, would she not agree that the response from the Prime Minister, from actions to date taken by the Government of Canada, is in fact advancing the values that Canadians hold so close to their hearts?
Member for Vancouver East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sadly, the answer is no.
Yeah.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I say, with respect to the government, I think that while the sentiments are laudable, we hope to hear some more substantive discussion of the issues than that. I want to ask my colleague from the NDP to just elaborate on one aspect that I don't think she touched on, which is the security dimension. I think this executive order actually risks making us less safe, not more safe. And I wonder if she agrees with me and if she might reflect on why that's the case.
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Thank you very much to the member for his question. That is actually an excellent question. From this point of view, when you have division and the politics of fear, it does not breed safety. And that's really what this executive order does. And so we in Canada take a different point of view. We want to open up our arms and our hearts and our minds to those who are fleeing persecution. We want to step up in a time of troubling times with our neighbor, with making such a discriminatory proclamation that we will work with the international community. We will take our place in the international stage and do our work. And so what we want to do is for the government to entertain and consider the proposals that we have put forward. Let's put the words of the Prime Minister into action. That's what this debate is all about.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for London West, or sorry, London North Centre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. A question regarding the Safe Third Country Agreement. How exactly would the NDP go about suspending it?
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so glad that the member asked this question because I didn't have time to get into the details. As it happens, Article 10 of the Safe Third Country Agreement allows for the simple and immediate suspension of this agreement for up to 3 months with possibility of an extension. It states, and I quote, "Either party may, upon written notice to the other party, suspend for a period of up to 3 months application of this agreement. Such suspension may be renewed for additional periods of up to 3 months. Either party may, with the agreement of the other party, suspend any part of this agreement," end quote. That's how we could do it. So my question to the member opposite and to the government is this. Will the government commit to the immediate suspension of the Safe Third Country Agreement as written in the agreement itself?
Reprise du débat.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Outremont.
The presidential executive order issued by Donald Trump prohibiting the travel of all refugees and individuals from 7 Muslim-majority countries in the Middle East and North Africa. Canadians are deeply concerned about President Trump's appalling racist immigration ban. Ces politiques fondamentalement mal.
These fundamentally ill-advised policies only spread intolerance and hate throughout the world, and they also have disastrous implications for hundreds of travelers and refugees. This also has major negative impacts on the economy of North America.
Individuals based upon race, religion, or country of birth, implemented by our closest neighbor, cannot be tolerated by Canada. We have the obligation to speak out. To be very clear, New Democrats unequivocally oppose this ban and condemn it. We denounce this policy, but like many Canadians, we're concerned that the Prime Minister and the Government of Canada have not done the same. Les néo-démocrates ont demandé ce
The NDP have called for this emergency debate, and I would like to commend my colleague, the member for Vancouver East, for having obtained it. We called for this debate, as well as concrete measures that the government can and must adopt so that Canada can do its part. Beginning with a formal statement that Canada does not endorse Donald Trump's ban on the immigration of Muslims, and on taking direct and concrete measures to deal with the impacts. The Canadian values of diversity, peace, and inclusion fly completely in the face of this executive order and everything it represents.
At times like these, our words must be clear and our actions must be real. The world is watching and lives hang in the balance. We must stand up to those who peddle the politics of fear and division. And Canada must step up and do its part. We support the government's initial move to provide temporary resident permits to those who intended to return to the U.S. but can no longer do so because of the ban. But there's much more that Canada can and must do.
Today, the New Democrats are calling for 5 specific measures. First, remove the cap of 1,000 applications for refugees from private sector, which we know was attained in only 1 month. A cap such as this one, especially when the United States have banned admission to Muslim, or rather Syrian refugees for an indeterminate time, is completely unacceptable and goes against the international law that has been advocated since the Second World War. People who want to provide aid should be able to do so.
Neighbors and raised tens of thousands of dollars and made plans to bring over Syrian refugees as private sponsors. But now, because of this government's cap, they had to phone the Syrian families they had promised to bring over to tell them that they could no longer help them, not for lack of resources or lack of willingness to help, but because of an arbitrary, artificial cap of 1,000 applications that this government could remove today if it wanted to. It's unacceptable and it has to change. 2,248 innocent Syrian refugees have been immediately and indefinitely stranded by Trump's ban. We have the capacity to help these people, and we must. Accélérer le traitement des demandes des réfugiés.
Expedite the processing of refugees is our second demand. We must do it for people who are approved for the U.S. before the ban or those who are about to be approved. Canada must aid these refugees who have been stranded by the ban. And we must implement a system that allows for the rapid approval of applicants in Canada because the security measures are compatible. We also need to work with the international community to tackle the gaps in the resettlement of refugees. There are thousands of them who cannot find a refuge or asylum because of the anti-Muslim immigration order of Trump. Canada must work in concert with its international partners in order to welcome refugees here until the ban is lifted. These are the initial proposals of the NDP. These measures should start immediately. We need to provide significant aid to everyone affected by Trump's ban on immigration and travel. We can no longer trust that the refugees in the United States will have access to a fair process. We must do our part and remove the cap to welcome refugees and work with the international community to help the numerous refugees who have been stranded by this ban. And Canada must obtain guarantees for people who travel to the United States to ensure that they are allowed to come to this country with no further additional harm.
To join us in condemning this ban and to take action to help the thousands of vulnerable people impacted by it. But instead, what have we received from the government? Well, I was shocked, Mr. Speaker, to look today at the transcript of the new point man, the Member of Parliament for Orleans, a former general, someone who's been around for a long time. For him to be seeking to find excuses is, for me, intolerable, especially when we know that he is supposed to represent the best of Canada in dealing with the U.S. What did he have to say specifically when he was asked about this racist ban on Muslims? Quote, "That's up to the United States to decide for themselves. It's within the legal remit of the President to issue executive orders." On CBC Radio's The Current this morning, on whether Canada needs to change its own policies in light of the U.S. policy changes. Quote, from the member from Orleans, "An adage of keep calm and carry on." Or another one is, you know, ice water in the veins until such time as clarity is provided either by us or by interaction with the Americans. I think that's the wisest course. Really? Keep calm and carry on? That's the best they have to offer? I listened to the Member of Parliament from Winnipeg, the Deputy House Leader of the Liberals, before, as he stood to justify the inaction of the Liberals by reading a tweet from the Prime Minister. Is that our foreign policy? Is that what Canada's standing up for human rights on the world stage boils down to in this era with this government? We're clear on this side of the House. Singling people out because of their religion, banning them because of that religion or their country of origin, edicts being sent out, so-called presidential orders governing by decree. Like my colleague from Vancouver East who brought this forward, Mr. Speaker, I never thought that I would see that happen in my lifetime, but I do know what happens when dealing with someone with that type of fascist behavior if we don't stand up to be counted. The NDP will stand up to be counted. We're not afraid to call a spade a spade. It's time to say no to Donald Trump, to say yes to human rights, and for the government of Canada to say no to these racist policies.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. Honorable député d'Argenté.
The Honourable Member for Argenté, la Petite Nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. I have a very simple question for my colleague. During his speech, he stated that our Prime Minister